You are now tuned into the SoCHiology podcast. SoCHiology is a lifestyle brand that analyzes Chicago culture and connected topics abroad, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. 2020 was an extremely emotional year for the entire world, obviously because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but for many other reasons as well. You know, the tragic murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, they sparked a series of protests and riots and looting across the entire country, but especially here in Chicago on the south side, the west side, and even downtown. It was a lot going on in the city last summer, and in this episode of SoCHiology, I'm going to talk with a young man from the south side of Chicago, Vashon Jordan Jr., who's a photographer. He fell in love with photography at a very early age, but we're going to talk about how not only did he develop a passion for photography, but he used that same passion to change the world and to document history in real time. So without further ado. All right, so Vashon, you know, you're a photographer. I'm a photographer. So, you know, it's a lot of things that I would love to know about you as well as our listeners on SoCHiology. Number one being, what got you into photography? So I read somewhere that it started with fishing trips. Is that true?
Yes, you did your research.
Yes, as always. I got to do my research. So tell me about those fishing trips and, you know, how that went about and got you into photography.
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me. Really excited to talk with you about this and the journey, because photography is a visual medium that's really popular, but is also really personal. Mm-hmm. And everybody has their story. So for me, as I look back on the years, I've noticed that I've always had an interest in capturing the moment. I've always been a fan of knowing that moments are fleeting and they have to be recorded and captured. So when it came to taking photos, now if you think back, you know, we're in the digital age and mm-hmm. they're starting to make a return, but disposable cameras used to be the thing.
Yep.
And that's what people used. And I received a disposable camera when I was like in elementary school, and I would be the one kid on the summer camp trip and on the field trips during the school year, taking photos to disposable camera. But one of the earliest memories where like my parents were like, "We think you got something," was those childhood fishing trips, and I would take some photos. But photography was always something that was one of many things that I did, mm-hmm. which in hindsight prepared me for the career path that I have today. Mm-hmm. But I really realized that I had an interest, and this interest was a little more than the average person, because I was the only person with a disposable camera, and I was so attracted to, let me get a photo of that, let me capture that and record it.
Yeah. And, you know, like you said, we're in the digital age now, but a lot of people don't understand the struggle of, you know, taking those pictures. You took like, you know, 100-something pictures on those disposable cameras. You got to take them to Walgreens, get them developed. And depending on, you know, how backed up they are, it might take you a week at most to get those pictures back. A lot of people don't understand that struggle and how it used to be back then. Now everything is instant. You just upload it and boom, there it is.
Yeah, and I think that's like my grounding in photography, because one of the biggest things about disposable cameras is, number one, you can't see your shot right after you take it. And number two, you have a very limited number of shots. So my grounding in photography was, what's the best moment, right? If I want a photo of my friend, when should I get that photo? What background should we have? Because you're only getting one shot. You're not wasting my film, right?
Yeah.
So I have to really think about moments. And I think in today's age, that gets lost when we take 150 photos and then we go back and pick the best one. Mm-hmm. With film and that disposable camera, you only have one shot to get it right. So that's my grounding of really trying to find and capture that moment, even though I have the capacity to take 1,000 photos and go back and pick one.
You know, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that I learned very early on. One of my mentors in photography, when I first started out in 2011, 2012, you know, he told me that he, you know, because I had helped him do a wedding once, like I was his second shooter. And, he knew most of the pictures I took, he really wasn't going to use because, I wasn't that good at that moment, but he just wanted to give me that experience. And when he was going through my SD card, I had took like almost 700 pictures. And he was like, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. It's about getting the moment. It's not about capturing every single moment. So I'm real glad that you mentioned that, because I think that's a mistake a lot of young photographers or even photographers nowadays in general make, because like you said, to your point, we have a lot more space, a lot more ability to take multiple photos, on your camera phone, all of that. It's all about getting that right moment. It's not about getting everything. It's just you want to get that right moment. And so that's very profound. So you was taking pictures at these fishing trips. What type of things would you take? Like what type of pictures? Like, would you take pictures of the fish that you guys caught? Would you take pictures of your family members as they was, in the boats or on the side of the pond? Like, give us a brief example of some things that you would capture.
So for me, it was super simple. It was a photo of the water, photo putting the worm on the fishing hook. Of course, when you catch something, at the time we're catching catfish and taking photos of the fish and holding the fish up. But what I realized that I was doing was covering the scene, getting every different aspect of the trip and telling that narrative story through photos is what I was doing. And what's actually cool is, because those photos are printed, I still have all of those images. Beautiful. The photos that I took on a disposable camera, I never threw them away, but I still have all of them in photo albums.
Got to keep those gentle reminders from the past. Got to keep that. So you evolved from the family fishing trips to the passion of photography. It followed you throughout high school. And so you went to Columbia College Chicago, to my understanding, correct?
Yeah, so I received my associate's degree from Kennedy King College, which is the City College of Chicago, and then I transferred to Columbia to complete my bachelor's degree. So I did 2 at Kennedy King and 2 at Columbia.
Okay, and I assume the passion for photography is what drew you to Columbia, because it's a media art school and all of that.
You know what's interesting? I actually majored in television.
Really? So you want to go into news or something like that?
Yeah, I think my thinking about it was more so of like, if I already know photography, I should try to get another skill in school and learn something different, instead of going to school and spending this opportunity on something that I already know. But definitely cameras and broadcast TV. Actually, when I was in high school, I was in an after-school program, and they had a summer portion, and they took us on a trip to Windy City Live.
Okay.
And I was hooked from there when I saw just that live TV and news and interviews and celebrities. That's when I knew this was something that I could see myself in. But photography was always a hobby. And I joke with folks that I think I'm just in a little too deep now. Too late to turn back.
Yeah. It's the streets need that now. The streets need that now. You can't walk away from the game now. So that's interesting. You went to Columbia because you was interested in broadcasting first. I started out, my major was broadcasting at Western Illinois University, and nice. my minor was film. That was the goal in the beginning, to be a film director. So it was the opposite with me. It's kind of like photography found me, when I was trying to go a different route in the beginning, because I wanted to go into the film directing world and things like that. But I had to realize that at the root of it all, photography, film directing, broadcasting, what have you, my strength was storytelling. That's really what's my strength. That was really what, binded me to all of these creative outlets. And I had to figure out a way to cultivate all of those outlets and keep them seamless. So you going into the broadcasting world, trying to find another skill to complement your photography, is still like your photography thirst got even larger, if you understand what I'm saying. And it's like, it was insatiable. You couldn't get away from it. Even if, it's not like you was trying to get away from it, but it's like, let me try to find something else to compliment. It's like, no, you don't need nothing to compliment me. I'm here.
Right, because also I used my time in high school. And I was always, so with the childhood fishing trips, that was my start into just taking photos and videos. But I realized that I was actually attracted to photography
Yeah.
when I got to high school. That is when I actually credit high school as my start in photography.
And what high school did you go to?
So I went to Brooks College Prep over in Roseland.
Got you. Okay. And that's where it really took off then. It really took hold of you there.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally a love at first sight moment. I never forget. It was my freshman year. It was the day of the school's pep rally before homecoming. And there was another student at the time. He was the school's photographer, Eric Chandler. And he had a DSLR. It was a Canon T3i, very simple entry level DSLR. And I'm telling you, that was my first time physically laying eyes on it. I've only used camcorders before. And I held it, never let it go, pretty much. And I actually became the school's photographer. So I was taking photos of all of the school activities. And I actually had my own photography club where I was teaching other students photography so they can take it on when I graduated. But that is where I really blossomed and was able to learn and grow as a photographer.
Yeah. And what year was this? When you was in the high school? What year was these?
So I started high school in 2013. I graduated in 2017.
2017, and then you went to Kennedy King, and then
Correct.
to Kennedy King, you went to Columbia College Chicago. Okay, so now that's the timeline. So we started in 2013, and now we're in May 25th, 2020, when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And we all know what happened after that, the ensuing events across the country, but especially here in Chicago, because we are Chicagoans and that's what we're talking about. We know what happened. We was out there. We witnessed it. We witnessed it in the South Shore. We witnessed it in Chatham. We witnessed it all over the place. We witnessed NBC out here covering the riots and all of that. You've been in photography at this point for about 7 years. What gave you that urge to say, I got to get out here in these streets and I got to capture what the hell's going on?
Simple. My life was on the line.
Yeah.
This was a fight for the Black life. When I look at George Floyd as a Black man, he was interchangeable. It could have been any Black man who would have suffered the same fate as we've seen historically.
Yeah.
So I knew that I had to get out there. And what we saw that was different was in Chicago, the last time we've seen protests and riots like this was back when Dr. King was assassinated.
Yeah.
That's the last time we've seen this. And when I saw Black women stepping up on the front lines, and I saw non-Black people coming out as allies, I knew as a Black man who was at the center of this, I had to go out and be a part of that. And with photography helps me understand and process the world. And photography is where I feel safe, behind the camera. I'm able to go around to the front of the protest, the middle, the back, the side. With a camera, you can go anywhere, but that allows me to get a good vantage point, 360, and understand it. So I wasn't initially coming out to do what the end result of my photography work was, but I am someone who's born and raised south side of Chicago, and I love the city. And I photograph the city as a result of that. So on any given year, of course, before COVID, and that completely uprooted our lives, one of the things that I would do that I'll actually be doing this Saturday again and next Thursday is I volunteer for all of the Chicago parades. Mm-hmm. So I take photos for the Thanksgiving parade, the Magma Lights Festival, the Halloween parades, and all types of events around the city. So
yeah, I saw you taking pictures at the Chicago Sky Championship parade as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that for work, but it's like that's I would have done that either if it wasn't for work. And so protest is a part of Chicago's DNA. That wasn't my first protest. I've done protests before. So when I came out on May 30th, I thought that it was business as usual. 30,000 people showed up. We protest, we come out, we fight, and we go home. The next week, June 6th, Activate Shaw's March of Justice, 38,000 people. When I saw that, I knew this was different. Mm-hmm. It was different. The momentum was still there. The energy was still there. And it kept going and going and going with thousands of people filling the streets. And then there came a moment that I went to some protests that weren't in the loop. They weren't downtown. They weren't outside of City Hall. They weren't outside the mayor's house in Logan Square. They were in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And some were protests, some were just community events and giveaways. But what I noticed was that when there wasn't a huge police presence, when they were not in the loop, when there wasn't an expectation of violence, the news coverage was only a fraction of what they got in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the moment where I realized I have to keep telling these stories, because the mainstream news outlets were picking and choosing what was newsworthy.
Yeah.
Because blood bleeds through to the front, and they weren't covering those community events. And that's why I decided to consistently do it, which the end result was I covered 37 protests in just about 3 months.
37 protests, 3 months. That's a lot of shooting. That's a lot of working. That's a lot of
17,000 photos.
That's a lot of work. People got the nerve, and I don't know why. I know why, but it's just ridiculous to me that how like now people are saying like it's a whole debate about wedding photographers getting fed. You know what I'm saying? Should wedding photographers get fed? Hell yeah, they should get fed for working 8 to 10 hours. You out there for hours. You know what I'm saying? You out there for hours, like running around. You putting wedding photography to, you making that look like light work. You went Super Saiyan. You know what I'm saying? And that deserves
Didn't
a whole
$1
meal.
off of it.
That deserves.
I better get a meal.
That deserves a lot of it. So, all right, I want to backpedal a little bit real quick. So you said you feel safe behind the camera,
right?
So you're out there with all of these people shouting, screaming. It's just. Some could call it chaos, some could call it, some can call it whatever they want, but it's just a lot of things going on around you. Never once did you feel threatened out there, surrounded by CPD, surrounded by protesters, surrounded by Trump supporters, all of that. Never once did you feel like, you were in enemy territory while you was out there shooting.
So I'm gonna, in the book that I put together with the photos, I'm gonna just read the last sentence that I wrote, like the foreword. And I said, despite being spurred by violence, this revolution was built on peace, love, joy, led by the youth, and occurred during the pandemic of COVID-19, Black Joy Revolutionary. And to expound on that and answering your question, when I was out in the protest, I was with my people.
Mm-hmm.
Folks were coming out to make sure that we had a better survival. I mean, if we just take a step back from the incidents and look at this as a whole, the entire movement and fight for Black life is literally a fight for us to be equal. It's the basic ask is, can you stop killing us? And when we go out to the protest, it was always love. It was always community. The only time that I felt in danger was by the people who are paid and under an oath to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was with the people in the protest, I never felt unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
Because of another civilian that was out there with
me. Yeah. Regardless of what their ideologies were.
Now, with the Trump supporters, that's a different breed.
Okay.
And there was definitely civilian on civilian violence with that. But with the protest that I was at, and people group it into BLM, and they're not all
absolutely
the same umbrella.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah, we know that, but that's what the narrative is.
Right, but that realm of protest, all types of backgrounds, identities, and thoughts and beliefs, but definitely. And I think that when people see certain protests, it looks like just chaos. But one of the things that gets lost is protests are extremely organized. Like, people have jobs at protests. There are block marshals who are leading and guiding the route. There are bike marshals who are typically white allies, the barriers between the police and the people. There are street medics out there. There are folks out there who are giving people out food and water and drinks. There are people playing instruments. Like, it's very, very, very controlled and developed to be safe.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Because, you know, you mentioned Dr. King, and that's the last time Chicago's seen something like this on that magnitude back in '68. You look at everything that, you know, the civil rights movement did, you know, all of the allied organizations that worked with Dr. King, they were extremely organized.
Right.
And if they could be that organized back then, you know, I mean, we could talk about the Montgomery bus boycott. You know, that was one of the most organized movements that Black Americans have ever put on. If they could be organized, surely these are organized in 2020, 2021. So that's a very good point that you made. Now, you're out there all of these days. You said over how many photos? 17,000?
17,000.
17,000. And I assume that's a lot of raw images, so that's a lot of space.
I have them all on a hard drive.
That's a lot of space. At what point did you say, you know what? After being out here in the streets of Chicago for so long, capturing so many emotions, I need to put this in a book. At what point did that click in your head?
So that goes back to my grounding in photography and my start. I've always been, I just consider myself a forward thinker in the sense of the reason I'm taking the photos in the first place was because I knew that these moments were fleeting. And I'm also someone who has worked in communications and worked in news. Before I actually started covering a protest, I was still at the time an intern for Chicago Public Schools, where I was serving as the district photographer. I did that for 3 years.
Okay.
So I worked in comms. I know how news works. I worked with media. But one of the things that concerned me was I knew we wouldn't be talking about this a year from now, maybe even months from now. I knew that I could post a photo. That photo can go viral. But now, what are we, like a year and a half removed from the protest? No one is looking at my social media, going back and looking over. All of that stuff is old news. And I knew that these stories were so important to be told because I think, and I talked about this a lot during February, I released a book in October. The following February, one of the things that I reflected on was how when we think about Black history, we think about Dr. King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. You can name a list of iconic Black figures, but there's one thing that they all have in common, and that is there's a photograph of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're on video. They're on some record. Can you imagine if we didn't have photos or videos of Dr. King? Do you think he would be as popular?
Not at all.
If we've only heard stories, and what we have to think about today is that we are tomorrow's history. We are going to be someone's ancestors. And if we don't start recording our history today, we're going to lose it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I knew that this needed to be in something that we can control. I don't control my social media. Mark Zuckerberg controls that. Jack Dorsey controls that. They can suspend my accounts today and gone.
Just to do it. Just to do it.
Just with the press of a button, I could say the wrong word and they don't care about how much history is on my page. Mm-hmm. It's gone. But I knew if I put this in a book, number one, you can flip through 3 months into a single book that is showing social media captions. And number two, the internet can get wiped out today. Mm-hmm. But that book is going to still be there as long as you take care of it. Mm. And that's that can get passed down.
That's real. That's real. That's real. So it's basically you were basically being a historian in the flesh, you know, a historian in real time. That's basically what you were doing. And that's exactly what the book is. So, right. You know, and just for those listening, and I'm gonna put the link to it in the bio. The name of the book is Chicago Protests, A Joyful Revolution. I like that word usage, a joyful revolution, because, you know, revolution tends to have a negative connotation.
Right.
We think revolution, we think, people getting killed, bayoneted, and, people waving
Yep.
flags and, throwing people off the top of a castle. No, it's a joyful revolution. Like you said, the simple ask was to stop killing us. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Laquan McDonald. But then there are a lot of asks that spawn from that, a lot of asks that spawn from that simple ask.
Right.
And that's why people are out there. That's why people are angry. That's why people are emotional, because it's been going on for so long. And, if we, it's greater than the number of the sands on the seashore. If we could name the many names of Black Americans that have been senselessly murdered, specifically by law enforcement, specifically by the government, specifically by, the cancer known as slavery. If we can just name all of those people, Jim Crow, if we can name all the Black Americans murdered by these institutions, is going to outnumber the sands on the seashore. And people want to talk about Black on Black crime, which doesn't exist. It doesn't amount to this. That's why people are out there. So it's a joyful revolution. I love that verbiage. And you was able to capture this joyful revolution in the streets of Chicago, a city that we love, but also a city that has been misunderstood for so long, but also a city that is very corrupt, a city that has very questionable motives, but a city that's very beautiful at the same time. It's kind of like a collage of all these different facets of Chicago, and you was able to capture all of that in this joyful revolution.
Yeah, and just to even talk more about that title, one of the questions that I got a lot when I was doing interviews about the book during the initial press run was, what made you focus on the joy? And I always have to correct the person doing the interview, because I never set out to focus on anything in particular. My entire goal and motivation was to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the media that we see has some sort of level of bias to it. So my whole thing was, let me go out here and just give it to you straight. And that's why I dared to cover Trump rallies and pro-police rallies. And that was another thing. People were surprised that it's like, why would you go out and cover that? But my thing was, if what I believe is honest to God truth, I can show you both sides. And if you are a truth-seeking person, you will see where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to not show that.
History is objective. It's subjective also, but ultimately it's objective. And I think that's where, school systems and, education kind of loses. They kind of fall off track, because history has never been objective. Like, think about it. When you was in school, and, this is just a sidebar, I'm going to let you get back to your thought. When you was in school, we talk about Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Malcolm X. That's really all we was taught. And on top of that, it was only like a paragraph. They could miss all of that to like one page, and it's like, okay, yeah, next, let's go to the Vietnam War. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was never objective in the public schools. And what you're doing is you're giving an objective overview of what's going on in 2020.
And we're in the different age. I think that what made these protests so unique and so powerful was we were used to that violence. Like, we were used to folks coming out in the streets and being met with violence. But the protests in 2020, you saw people swag surfing outside the mayor's house. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so unique, how the modern day protests were just full of joy, light, and love. And it's like, we don't even have to come out. And because, you already know the folks that were looting weren't the folks that were out there at the peaceful protest. Those are two different sets of people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, for us to be able to just come out and say, we're going to come out and have a dance party and get on the mic and perform. A lot of folks leading protests are artists. And that was one of the things that super nonviolent approach. That's one of the things that really made these protests so unique, and how we just fought fire with love, because just have to remember, we're out here responding to violence with peace.
Yes. And love is always greater than hate. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. A lot of motherfuckers don't like to hate. I know. I get it. It's hard to hear when you angry and. But the reality is love is definitely stronger than hate. It's just the reality. That's just the facts.
Yeah,
So
that's true. I'll give you my proudest moment from the protest. So I was at a protest, and this was like later on after I did a lot of the coverage that I did. And a young white girl came up to me. She's probably mid to late teens. It's like, hey, are you Vashon? Yeah. She's like, I follow your work. Look what you do. But she told me that her parents, and she's from the outside of Chicago. She told me that her parents didn't want her going to the protest because they thought they were dangerous and violent because of what they saw on the news.
Yeah.
But she showed them my work, and that changed their minds and opened their hearts. And they went from discouraging her to go to the protest to encouraging her to go join after seeing my work.
A camera changed someone's standpoint on that. A camera changed someone's perspective. Your perspective through that aperture changed someone's perspective on humanity. Look how that works.
Showing the truth. I know we like to say that the photos don't lie. And it's like, that's true, but the photographers do. You can go out, because if I go out to a protest for an hour and I bring back one image, photos is a fraction of a second.
Yep.
You can really alter and change the entire outlook of everything that went on with that one image. So photos don't lie, photographers do. And it's very important to just understand where your work is coming from. And for this, it's coming from somebody who's from the city, who knows the city and has a different stake. Because I'm not someone out reporting on this with a hope to keep these same institutions in place.
Correct. So Chicago Protest, A Joyful Revolution, that's out now on Amazon. And where else is it available?
It's also in 16 Chicago public libraries. So you can search the book on Google. You don't have to buy it on Amazon. You can go check it out in a library. The book is also available in the Chicago History Museum's collections. And I've actually donated all 117 images from the book to the Chicago History Museum, where I become the first Chicago-born photographer, only 5th overall, to have their own photo collection in the museum. And when I went to donate the images and the book to the museum to have a part of their collection, they told me something that I'll never forget. They told me that my book was the first artifact from the protest in the museum. And think about that. We're the 3rd largest city in the country. We've had undoubtedly historic protests. And if it wasn't for my book, there would be nothing in the History Museum talking about the 2020 protest.
Wow. So that's all the more reason why the work you're doing is monumental, groundbreaking, historic, necessary. And
for the audience and everybody else, I'm one person, and what I've done is use photography to move the needle. Everybody has something they can contribute. You're contributing by even giving me space and hearing my story and having me hear yours to shape the perspectives. Everybody has something that they can do. So you don't have to be a photographer, you don't have to be an activist, but everybody has something that they can do in their life to move the needle, because it's going to take all of us to save us.
Absolutely. We all got to move the needle so we can get those decibels going and we can make some noise. So, that's amazing, Vashon. I definitely congratulate you on all of that. I salute you. After this, so after you published the book, after you donated it and got into these different platforms and avenues, you became the staff photographer for the Governor Pritzker. Is that correct?
Yeah, for his re-election campaign.
Okay. So tell us about that. How's it working with the governor, the lieutenant governor, the first Black lieutenant governor of the state?
Yep, first one.
Walk us through a typical day of working, on the staff.
Now, my background is familiar with politics. So just to add that extra context, when I graduated high school, I spent 3 years with Chicago Public Schools. During that time, I also held a photography internship under Mayor Emanuel. And I spent 3 years traveling around with his photographer, taking photos. And I also spent the first week and a half helping out and photographing their life. So politics has been something that I've been involved in when it comes to photography. Now with this position here, it's just surreal to be able to travel the state and cover the governor. But what makes the job so great is they're just great people.
Mm-hmm.
And our lieutenant governor is from Chicago.
Yep.
From the south side of Chicago. She's born and raised here. So for me, on the campaign side, so it's very split. You have the official side, which is the state side, and those are the employees that cover him for the state. On my side, everything that I do is political, and I'm creating images for us to use in his reelection campaign. So it's not the same as following him around every day, photographing everything that he does, because I'm not the recorder of our state's history. Actually, there is no photographer in that position, but that is different. So my job is I cover him at campaign related events, some state events, but it's more so very select events. So the election is in November of next year. We're going to, of course, ramp up and do a lot more. But just to give you some background, since I've been there for 2 months, any given day, I could be in our campaign office working on editing photos and choosing photos for us to use for different materials in social media. And then, of course, we have events. And I think one of the things that was a shock to me, but shouldn't have been a shock to me, was this is legitimately a state position. I just had a assignment just a couple of days ago where I had a 2-hour drive each way. I've been on a couple trips where there have been 5-hour drives each way for this. So that makes it
man.
Yeah, we had to go all across the city. Yeah, the state.
Man, can I take Amtrak? Shit.
I mean, that's the other side of having a state position, because Chicago is close to the top of the state.
Right.
So
damn near out the state. You know what I'm saying? We all the way in the corner.
I think we're our own state, but that's another story.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
Because when you go outside of Chicago, it's like, is this your Illinois?
Mm-hmm.
It's very different. And but I have to do that. So I actually have an assignment 2 weeks from yesterday where I have to drive 3.5 hours each way to cover an event. So I'm going to get up, do a 3.5 hour drive, cover the event for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and do the drive back to Chicago.
That's a lot of gas money. That's all I'm thinking about. That's a lot of gas money. Because gas prices right now, man.
It's something. I've been in a couple of cities where I think the cheapest I got was maybe $3.50. That's it. Yeah. I've seen some $4 here in the city.
Yeah, it's getting up there, man. It's getting up there, but yeah, it's time. It takes a lot of time. People look, they be like, oh, that's great. He staff photographer for the governor. Oh my God, that's amazing. Which it is. But these are the things that they don't see, having to take 5-hour drives there and back. That's 10 hours out your day already. And we're not even talking about capturing it. We're not even talking about dumping the footage. We're not even talking about editing, and then you got to do it again, like maybe a couple of days, that's what they don't see. So, it takes a lot of perseverance to, really get through that. And it seems like you're doing it. So, that's a great opportunity, covering the governor, the lieutenant governor. Then we got another opportunity that you have with the Chicago Bulls. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have an opportunity coming up in February for Black History Month. Now, I don't know exactly how much I can say.
Okay, understood.
Because it is for Black History Month, and I don't want to spoil the entire thing. But what I will say is that we are trying to reimagine how we do Black History Month and reimagine the images that we show and move away from just showing the past, but to also showing the present, who will eventually be our future. So I have been selected along with a few other photographers to capture some photos for an assignment related to Black History Month out in the community. And those photos will be shown during the Bulls Black History Month game, which I believe is February 7th against the Phoenix Suns. But, You will see the photos. They will be a part of broadcast drops and a lot more that's still being planned and worked out, but definitely something special coming up with the Bulls for Black History Month in February.
Perfect. And, it's perfect timing too, because the Bulls are great again. It's like we had some years that we it was hard, man. It was like it was some years I didn't even watch a Bulls game at all. You know what I'm saying? Like it was tough. And like now we a serious contender for the East. So it's perfect time. Everything is like in its perfect alignment right now. So that's great. That's dope. I got 2 final questions for you. The first question I'm going to ask you, Vashon, is because I know a lot of people are going to ask me and they're going to be wondering, what type of cameras do you use?
Great. I love talking technical. So I use a Canon. So for all the protest stuff, I use a Canon 1DX Mark II.
Got it.
And so this is a professional sports camera. That's what I use, a Canon 1DX Mark II. And then the lenses are pretty basic, a 24-70, 2.8, 70-200, 2.8, and that flash. And now I'm starting to make that switch over to Sony mirrorless cameras.
Okay.
So in addition to the Canon 1DX Mark II, I also have a Sony A9.
Okay.
Same thing with those basic ones. So
I have that too. I have it sitting right here next to me, actually.
Oh, the A9. What you have? A 24-70, 70-200.
Yep, I got 24-70, 2.8 G Master. I got the 70-200. Yep. I got a 16-35. Yeah. So it's sitting right here. So
we have the same loadout.
Yep.
I've been looking into some of the new. I know Canon has a R3 coming out, which has. Have you heard about the new R3?
Not too much. I know it's coming, but I haven't like really paid attention to what the talking is about it and all of that.
You should check it out. And this is something just for all my photography heads out there. And I'm not a paid spokesperson for Canon, but I should send this to them and ask for a couple dollars. But they have a feature where the autofocus can track your eye.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And where you look at in the viewfinder, it will automatically focus on that object.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's wicked. It's a $6,500 camera, but I cannot wait to hopefully try that out.
I would love that because yes. Yes.
Right. Yes.
Because the human eye is still greater than these cameras. At the end of the day, the human eye is still always going to be superior to any camera that rolls out, regardless if it's 5,500 or 10,000. None of these cameras are just basically trying to replicate what the human eye can see. Literally. So if it's tracking what the human eye is focusing on, yeah, that's groundbreaking right there. That's groundbreaking.
Right. Like, how many do you want? Yes.
Yeah. That's groundbreaking. Wow. Yeah, that's dope.
So I'm really excited to check that out.
So, and then my last question, and I just want you to think real long and hard on this. Do you think the Chicago skyline poses better than any other city in the country as a photographer?
Easy.
Yeah, easily. I mean, it's really no contest.
Nobody else compares. You gotta push that question up to my guy, Six Figure Dilla.
Yeah, he was on this podcast as well. He was on this podcast. Well, yeah, no one poses better than the Chicago skyline. We could talk about New York is just too crowded. It's too much going on, too much chaos. They don't know what they want to do over there. Every other city is just miniature, but Chicago is like the perfect size, and it always knows how to look good.
I've actually been doing a series recently where I've been taking some photos of the sunset in different parts of the city, including the skyline. I was just over near Madison and Pulaski, got some photos of East Garfield Park, but I have about, I think, 6 or 7 photos that I put out recently just showing the beauty of the city. And of course, the skyline is definitely a main character and all of that.
Yeah, the skyline can't be defeated. And I actually did see one of your photos from that sunset series. And, nice. I guess it is true. It is grass out west.
Right. I have to go see it for myself.
It is grass out west. So shout out to out west Illinois. Y'all got grass. But we still love y'all.
Trying to be objective.
If you enjoyed this podcast, I ask for two things. Number one, leave a 5-star review. And number two, pass it on to a friend who may enjoy it as well. And don't forget to subscribe to our other podcast, Mogul Motivation from True Stories Media.